What is up, everybody? We are back with another episode of Just Stories with BT podcast. This is season 3, which means we are talking to amazing authors and getting to know the people behind the words that they've written and kind of getting to hear their story and what brought them to writing a book and kind of everything around that. And so I'm really excited this week. I have Dr. Stefanie Boyer. So thank you for coming. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Brett. I've been looking forward to talking to you for a while now.
Yes. So, and in fact, like for those who don't know, like I have this Calendly. So, like if I talk to somebody or like ask someone, hey, you want to come on the podcast? I send it out, and then you randomly like I didn't hear back for a long time, and then all of a sudden you just booked, and like with no, and so I just saw it, and I was like, oh, sweet, we're meeting.
I know, finally, we're doing it. I can't wait.
Okay, so as always, I'm going to introduce you to the world. So, anyone who doesn't know Dr. Boyer, I'm going to give you like the 30-second rundown, and then you tell me what I missed or what I screwed up. Sound good?
Got it.
Awesome. Okay, so here we go. Here is Dr. Stefanie Boyer in like 30 seconds. All right, so first off, she was born in San Diego, which is where I live, FYI. And so you grew up a little bit there, a little bit in Virginia, a little bit in Maryland, a little bit in Florida. So I'm going to ask you about that. As a child, you were very much into sports, which obviously had a big part of the rest of your life. So besides that, when you were in high school, you were also in a cheerleader. In fact, you were a 2-time All-American cheerleader. You placed second place in state championships for track and field. You were Miss Teen Shenandoah Valley. I don't even know how to say it. Shenandoah Valley. What is it? Shenandoah Valley.
Shenandoah Valley.
All right, Shenandoah Valley pageant. So obviously everyone knows about that. Um, as a when you got older, your first job was at Texas Steakhouse and a saloon. So very upscale place. That's from the name of it, as a hostess. And then you went to school. So you went to USF, scholarship athlete, and in fact, you had a record for 8 years in javelin, which is very impressive. Your first job out of school, out of there, was as a firefighter, which is kind of crazy. You also worked at U.S. Customs, and then obviously a very natural transition into being a PhD professor at Bryant. So this is very common, I'm assuming. Um, in 2018, you co-founded Rainmaker, which is a consulting company around sales training, which I want to talk about. In 2020, you co-wrote The Little Black Book of Social Media, which we will talk about. In 2021, you were a TEDx speaker on getting what you want. Just listened to it this morning, actually, which is awesome. We'll talk about that. And then most importantly, you have figured out how to train your dog, how to open your refrigerator and bring you a beer while you're sitting on the couch. And then now here you are. So that's your life in 30 seconds.
The highlights, all the
Highlight.
highlights.
So what did I miss? What would
It's so
what would you
funny.
have to tell somebody about your life that I missed?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you covered a lot of it. And that nugget about being in a pageant, I think you're the first one that has talked about it.
Nice.
And the
Oh,
cheerleader thing too. So,
so tell me, so obviously, being a scholarship athlete and having records and all this stuff. So that was obviously athletics was a huge part of your life. What do you think you learned from athletics that transferred into having success, in like a career success?
oh, sure. Athletics, whether it was a team sport in high school or at the university level, it's hard work, dedication, communication, being able to work as a team, and that will to win. Right? When you're competing at such a high level, that competitive drive and all of that pulled together. And I use it across different areas of my life. And same thing with my students. As a professor, I get companies that come in and want to hire students, and they always love talking to athletes because they have that drive and they know the value of hard work.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, so tell me, how did how did you go from, well, first off, so where did the firefighter part play into this, and how does that even happen?
That's interesting. So when I was in high school and earlier than that, I was such a tomboy. I love sports. I didn't have the best manners, and so my parents enrolled me into this program that taught you about modeling, and I ended up entering into pageants. So I was in the Miss Teen of America pageant, and when I was 15, and I started doing some locals, and so then I was I think it was like Miss Teen or Miss Stevens City, and I was riding around on all the fire trucks all around town. And so the guys would help me up on the truck. I'd have these huge high heels on and this like long flowing dress, and they'd put a chair on top of the fire truck, and I would just go and I would wave to all the people. But as I was doing that, I really started to admire the people that worked at the fire station and, on the ambulance, because
Mm-hmm.
most of them were volunteers. They were giving up their time. They were time with their family, and they were risking their lives to serve the community. And there are only a
Mm-hmm.
few people that were paid to do it. So I was just so inspired by that. I started to volunteer and became a first responder. And then as soon as I turned 18, I finished up my license to become a firefighter. And so that's what I worked on right after high school. I became a firefighter while I was also in community college.
That's
But
great.
and it's such a good feeling when you feel like you're making an impact and you're helping people,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a challenge too, because there's a lot of emotional pain and struggle and questioning the meaning of life when you
Mm-hmm.
see so much heartache and hardship. So,
Yeah. No, absolutely. I know, like, everybody has strengths and weaknesses and things they're good at. And I know that side of it, I know I would struggle with for sure. I have a cousin who's actually, her and her husband, they both work in the hospitals where they do like grief counseling. One of them is like a grief counselor, and the other one, like, yeah, works with these patients that are kind of, it's not going to, they're not going to make it, and they have to talk to these families. And I was like, and it's so admirable because you need that support when you're in that situation. But I could never do it. Like, they'd come home with this heaviness of like having to deal with that. Same thing like a firefighter, policeman, like you see things that normal people never see. And then you have to like weigh that, which
right.
is which can be heavy. So you obviously, you're doing that, then you go to school. How does that all lead to you becoming a professor?
Right. I was a firefighter, and I went to a community college at first, and I loved it. I loved feeling like I was important, but something was really pulling at me when I was at a community college, where I felt like I was missing out on that team element. I was missing sports. So I went to Frostburg State University, and
Oh yeah, Frostburg State. Heard of that one.
I became a track athlete, and I got to play volleyball as well. And I just absolutely loved it. My parents moved to Florida, and so they bribed me a little bit with a Forerunner. I really wanted one of those. They were newer at the time. I thought it was the most beautiful car ever. So they told me if I would move down and go to USF, then I would be able to get this vehicle. So I was so excited to get that, and I transferred down, became a scholarship athlete there, and I was training, so much training, so many hours a day. Ended up injuring my back, and I wasn't able to compete, so I had to redshirt my senior year. And when I did that, I had already taken a class with a professor, Marvin Carlins, in management. It was like the only class that I took that wasn't into, the arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to work for him. After I graduated with my undergraduate, I had always thought I was just going to be a javelin coach. I threw the
Yeah.
javelin, thought I was going to be a javelin coach. That didn't end up happening. That was a huge problem, huge pain, huge downtime in my life with that, you know, uh, incident with my back, and decided to go ahead and get my MBA and study business. And so that's where I found sales, and that's where I found marketing, and it just went on from there. So, the path is just, it winds around. I
Yeah.
never would have thought I would have been a professor. It wasn't really, I had tunnel vision for training, going to the Olympics, or the Olympic trials at least. And then I thought, I'm going to be a javelin coach, and this is going to be my life. So
Yeah.
lots of
That's
turns.
crazy. Yeah, I mean, that's very common. I think that's something that comes up so much in these podcasts where I'm interviewing all these different people that have had a lot of success in different areas. And I can't even think of any where it seemed like the path was straight. Like, oh, I'm going to do this and just did it. It's always, that's kind of life, and it's about how you adapt. Or, I just watched, when the Olympics were on, I watched that HBO came out with a documentary that Michael Phelps kind of produced around Olympic athletes and how they call it like the Olympic blues or something, where it's basically like it showed that like 60 or 70% of athletes afterwards go into this depression because their entire life is this sport and this thing, and then it just comes to a crashing halt, and then it's just done. And once you can't compete anymore, you're done. You're off the team. The funds are gone. Like it's just done. And they have like the spiral down, you know. And I can imagine, you know, even at the collegiate level and how you were doing and wanting to do that, that had to be really hard, because I'm sure that's at that point was your entire identity, right? Like you were an athlete. That's what you were. And then what do you do?
Exactly. Yeah, and during that time, I had a 4.0 at University of South Florida. So I ended up injuring my back. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat right. I was in constant pain. I was constantly over at the doctor. I racked up $18,000 of debt and just medical bills going in. Nobody could help me. The doctor told me that I had the back of a 70-year-old woman. I was
Jeez.
20 years old. So it was like completely desiccated in my discs. It was
Yeah.
so painful. So I really lost my identity. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had always been this really great student. I had already talked to that professor to see if I could go into work for him. So
Mhm.
essentially, he had some graduate assistants, and they would help teach the class. And he agreed, and so all of that kind of was taken away because I couldn't even sit to take the GMAT to get into grad school. So
Jeez.
here I am, 4.0 at the university. I sit to take the GMAT. I can't focus. I'm just in pain. It's so horrible. I got, I think, like a 460 or 480, and the very minimum you could get is 500. And I remember contacting the school, and I was like, I have a 4.0 here. It's supposed to diagnose, this test is supposed to show you how I'll do when I start out in the first semester of the program. That's the whole point of the test.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I have a track record of success. I'm not going to fail the program. And they just said, look, we're sorry. And so I kind of was carrying on with my life. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was interviewing at different places. People would say, you're overqualified. You have a 4.0. Why would you come here? So here I am. I graduated. I have no job. I always had a path in front of me. I always
Mhm.
knew, this was next and this is going to be my schedule. So I started doing some grant writing. My mom worked at the YMCA and at Girls Inc. And so I started doing some of that. And I started trying to rehabilitate my back with a trainer at the
Mhm.
YMCA. And it started helping, and it was, eye opening to remember you have to just follow a process, and you can't have perfection overnight or maybe ever. It's just a
Yeah.
process, and you're making progress, and that was good. Um, so I remember one of the days I was actually going to visit a friend in Orlando, and it's 3 hours from my parents' house, where I was staying at the time. It was over the summer, and I was 10 minutes away. I get a call from that professor, and he said, "Hey, Stephanie, are you gonna come work for me? Are we good to go?" And I told him, I was like, "I failed. Like I failed the test. I can't get in. It's just, I'm so sorry. You were counting on me." And
Yeah.
so he said, "Look, go take the test again. You've got 3 days. I'll talk to the dean. If you can get at least the 500 minimum, then you can do this." And so that, at that point, I knew like my future was behind two options. It was either like
Yeah.
go see my friend for, even a few minutes, or I could just turn around. So I immediately turned around. I called my mom and I said, "Mom, please help me. I need to take the GMAT by this date." She found one place that had one seat open, and I was
Wow.
able to sit for that. And so as soon as I got to their house, I had the book and I started practicing sitting for 3 hours so I could take the test, and just practicing being able to focus for that time.
Yeah.
Ended up going in, and they told me the score as soon as I was done, and I was so distracted. It's like I could see trucks driving by, and it was such high tension. But as soon as the test was over, it told me I got exactly 500. So it was like I needed every second of those 3 days to sit
Yes.
and study for that. So, and just to practice sitting for so long.
Yeah.
And so I was finally able to make it, and that really did change my life, to have someone just
Man.
believe in me and try to give me a shot there.
Yeah, it sounds like a script for like a Hallmark movie, like you turn around the card, all the stuff, you get the exact number. But I love it. I feel like that's how life works out sometimes, and it was
It's
it was obviously meant to be, and it just worked itself out.
it was like there was never more clarity, in the moment where I knew I had to at that moment turn around right then. You don't
Yeah.
always know what's going to happen. I just felt like I knew if I didn't do that right then,
Yeah.
it wouldn't work out.
No, that's how it goes. There's always those moments in life, that you pivot and you figure it out. So then you end up, years later, you become a professor, and now you've been teaching for a long time, right? So, and then eventually so I guess which come first? So did the coaching thing come first or the book?
The Are you talking about Rainmakers,
Yeah,
the app
Rainmaker.
we
Mm-hmm.
created? Uh, we started working on that in 2018. So really how that started when I came to Bryant in 2009, I started hosting sales competitions in class. And
Nice.
with selling, you can't just take tests. You can't just know what you're supposed to do. You have to be able to apply it and
Yeah.
perform, right? Like that GI Joe fallacy. I'm sure you've heard it. Like at the end of GI Joe, it always says, "Knowing is half the battle." That cartoon from the
Yeah.
80s,
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
that's not the case. That's a total fallacy for sales. You can't just know what you're supposed to do. You have to be able to do it. And I mean, I've gone into a lot of meetings before where I'm like, "Oh, these are the things I want to do," and it just doesn't turn out that way.
Yep.
So it's all applied. So we started with that. I started getting phone calls because employers would come in and they would role play, they would have a conversation with my students, and we'd score them on the conversation. That was the competition. And then some faculty and students at other schools would call and they would say, "Can we come to join your competition?" And I was like, "No way. This is too much work as it is. You want me to like do this for you too? Who has time for that?" And so finally we decided to go ahead and open it in 2012. This is going to be our 10th year of hosting
Wow. Awesome.
our open event. And what was happening, we were just getting people to come in and they wanted to participate, but we just didn't have enough room. And so in 2018, I was asked to scale the competition with someone who has technology. My co-founder, Scott Randall, he had a company, Brand Games, with he has some simulations in the Smithsonian. And so
Wow.
I was thought, okay, well, he's the expert on this. If he can do it and we can offer it free to college students to come in and train and compete, then I'd like to. So we started that in 2018, and then we wrote the book in 2019, the book on social media.
Mm-hmm. And so tell us about that since we're there. Give us the 10,000-foot view of the book and kind of what's the main takeaway and what would people get from reading it?
Sure. Well, the book is The Little Black Book of Social Media: Strategies to Ignite Your Brand. And it could be if you want to be an influencer, if you want to use it for business or just your professional brand. And the reason we wrote it, it was twofold. First of all, we were constantly being asked by people how to do social. So
Mhm.
my co-founder or my co-author, Charmine Adaran, she is just this digital marketing guru, and she has businesses knocking down her door to come run social media campaigns, create social media campaigns. She started a concentration on campus. So we work together because she's a foodie influencer and I'm on LinkedIn and doing some sales influencing that way. So we kind of brought our skills together and we said, how can we help more people? Because we had to turn away so many companies and so many individuals. We just don't have time. So we went ahead and wrote a book and we said, okay, well, what would we advise people to do? Let's map this out and give it to them. And then we were also just really tired of seeing everybody around us writing books that they weren't as busy as we were, and we thought, oh, we have all this information to share. We wanted to share it. So
Yeah.
really, it doesn't matter what platform you want to use. The book just helps you. Very simple guide. It's 30 steps. It's a couple pages for each of the steps. Very much applied to teach you how to launch your brand, to improve your network, make better quality connections, how to reach out to people, no matter which platform you are. So it's very much a strategy book,
Mhm.
and just to help you be more successful. If you're going to take the time to try to create your brand online on social, you might as well do it right the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I did read in there, and I don't know if it's in Rainmaker, I think you did it, where you guys used AI to kind of pull in like a ton of different sales conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you
Yeah,
tell us about that? Because it was really
sure.
interesting to me.
Sure. No one's really done this before, and so it's been very, very difficult.
Mhm.
But so when we turned that sales competition into AI, instead of having the students come into a room filled with employers, somebody that's going to be the buyer, and a panel of people that are judging them, we wanted to take some of the bias away, because as humans, we have unconscious bias. We have no idea that we're biased, and
Mhm.
our evaluation of others, the more people look like us and sound like us and are like us, we tend to score them better. So we thought, what if we could take that away? So now the students are actually practicing their business conversations with an AI bot. So now it's the bot that's in there with them. And instead of the panel of judges, it's the artificial intelligence that's actually scoring them. So the
Wow.
students come in and they have this conversation. As soon as the conversation is over, it tells them what their score is and how they performed on each component. So with that, we started out as a competition, and the faculty all over the US and abroad have helped us to pull it together. It's really a team effort. So they said, well, wouldn't it be great if we could practice this instead of just a competition? And we said, yes, that'd be great. And so we opened it
Yeah.
up for them to practice. And then they said, well, the conversation is long. What if we broke the conversation up into the different elements of the conversation? So we did that last fall and into the spring. So just between the fall and spring last academic year, the students did over 100,000 role plays with
Wow.
feedback. And so now we created a storytelling sales competition, and that's launching actually right now, where
Wow, that's
students are
awesome.
learning, how do I tell my story, how do I use the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result. So they go in and they learn all these things on videos, they take quizzes, and then they go into this pitch perfecter, because students don't understand that bartending will help them be a better seller. So we try to help them find their story about when they
Mhm.
captained a ship, or they studied abroad, or they were an athlete. So we help them do that, and then they go into an elevator and they have this pitch to an employer in the elevator. So the employer's like on the phone walking in front of them. It's a first person player video game, and the employer's like, I
Yep.
know, I got to find some university talent. I'm getting on an elevator. I'll let you know when I have a plan. Click. And then the bot turns around and the student is there. The student has already seen the job description,
Yeah.
and then the student has to start that conversation. I couldn't help but understand, or over here, you're hiring.
Yeah.
I'd love an opportunity. Here's why you should give me a shot. And then they have to do that pitch, and it's scoring them on how well they're telling a story and using data and focusing on what the employer
Mhm.
actually wants based on their job description.
That is incredible. That's so cool. I love it. I think that um I mean, for someone like me, I've been, teaching sales training for 15 years, and so I just love the sound of this, because at the end of the day, the struggle that I've always had for years in corporate America, where I'm taking on new classes or people or whatever, is having to overcome this internal objection with your new hires or your salespeople, where they don't want to role play because it has this bad stigma, right? Like no one wants to practice, because it's difficult, it's embarrassing if you don't know. There's all these things that people make it out to be, but in reality, it is the absolute best way to get better, because you're always going to be more challenging than an actual customer, because the other person knows the answers. That, so they know what you're supposed to say or what you should be saying. And in reality, the guests that come into your store or your marketplace or your business, they don't know what you're supposed to say. So you don't, it's easier, but that's why role playing is so important. And what you said about the elevator pitch is that is just like, it's like music to my ears, because I had a phase where for years I used to travel with this whole, I had this bag, and inside the bag it had these poles that would extend up, and we had curtains and these clips. And so when I would go to these big markets, do these big training meetings, we would actually set up a fake elevator, life size. It was 9 feet tall, had these great curtains, top thing we'd burn. And so then we'd actually set up the situations, just like you said, and the people would be in a line, and we would call people randomly, or, you'd have volunteers come up, and it would be like, I'd walk in and the timer would go off, and they'd have 30 seconds or 60 seconds or 45 seconds to do their pitch. Right.
Oh
And
my
it
goodness.
was putting it into practice, because I would tell them before I would get to a market, hey, I'm coming, elevator's coming, like, you may get called. So you had to be ready. So then everyone would practice. And it made it more fun, and less, I think it took the edge off. But the reality is, just like you said, is that in life, sometimes all you have is 45 seconds or a minute, for that first engagement. And if you can't hook somebody, then that's it. A lot of times that was your chance.
Yeah, and you know what? It may not be on an elevator, but it could be that you go to a conference or a meeting and you're the first person in the room with that one person. You only have a little bit of time.
Yeah.
It could be a Zoom call and you have to quickly introduce yourself at some point in a meeting. So we try to make it something a little bit fun with the elevator. But I have to tell you, I haven't met anybody that just starts off and they're like, I love role
Yeah.
playing.
No.
I haven't met anybody like that. And when I first was role playing with my students, I would tell them to go do a role play and they get lost in the bathroom. All of a sudden they had stomach problems out of nowhere. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what did everybody eat last night that they can't do this? It was like, it was terrifying for them. And so with the bot, even though it's literally judging them, they say that they don't feel like they're being judged when they're doing that. But then also as a manager, who has time to do hours and hours of role plays? But
Yeah.
at the same time, if you're a company, do you want your new employees to train with your customers, or do you want them to train with a bot in a playground, a sandbox, a safe environment?
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
that's
That
what
was
we're
really
that's
cool.
what we're trying to accomplish here, is just training that sales process and helping people to have more confidence. And they're doing it. I had a student last semester, John Fuller. He did 350 role plays in
Wow.
the semester, whereas I used to be able to get my students to do 6 role plays. So technology is such a huge help.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's amazing. So all these years of being a professor, I have to ask, like, have you had any of these like funny, teacher classroom things? Cause I watched a YouTube video like 2 weeks ago that showed all these professors that locked their knees and they passed out, cause they were standing too long. So I'm not saying that's happened, but is there anything that you can think of that is just one of your favorite stories to tell about teaching?
I mean, for me, there's always some kind of awkwardness, either with my hair or wardrobe. Like if you saw the TED Talk when I was on stage, right before I went on, they had to tape the microphone onto my back, the skin on my back, and I was like holding it here. All of a sudden, I had a piece of hair that like just flew. So there's like this big chunk of skin, weird hair. But I remember when I was a PhD student, I always wanted to really look the part because I was close to the age of my students. At USF, I had some students that were in their 70s that would come back to classes. So it was non-traditional, and sometimes I was just younger. I always wanted to look the part. And so I would stand in front of the mirror and I would look at my outfit. I don't know if guys do this. I know women definitely do this. I'm sure some guys do it, where you put on 2 different shoes and you're like, okay, which one? And so I had this like dark brown, pointy, high heel shoe. And then I had this one that was rounder. And I would stand in front of the mirror and I would like lift one leg up like a flamingo. And I'm like, how does the outfit look on this side? How does it look on that side? And then I think I got a phone call. I panicked. I left the house. I'm at the university. I'm running in, and all of a sudden I'm like running. And one leg is like so much taller than the other one. And I looked down, I was like, oh my gosh, I have completely different shoes on. And I was so self-conscious. When I went into the classroom, I stood like a flamingo. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I
Oh
think
my God.
standing like a flamingo on one leg was so much worse than just standing with
You should
two
have just
different.
gone barefoot. Just been like, forget it. All class, we're practicing a new method today of taking our shoes off to see if it helps us focus. There's something.
Well, and sometimes they would come off. And so when I was teaching for Dr. Carlin's, he had this section of 450 students. He had two of them. So you have to go on the stage. I remember one time I was like walking up on the stage and my shoe falls off as I'm walking up the stairs. And I get to the stage, all of a sudden I pause. And then I just like put myself in reverse and just like went right back to put it back on. But so self-conscious because
Yeah.
I remember when I was in college and I get bored in class and I'd start looking at the outfit the professor was wearing. I was like, oh, that's interesting, or like their jewelry, and you're
Yeah.
totally not
Yeah.
listening. And so I was always so self-conscious about that, and so many awkward moments that you just
Oh,
kind of
that is
chuckle and
hilarious.
laugh at yourself about.
Yeah, I had I've for the last like 5 years, my office has been up in Orange County, and I'm in North San Diego, so it's like an hour and 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on traffic. So I'm used to this commute. I go a couple days a week for years, and my routine is like I usually get up at like 5:15. I drive up and work out up there, shower, and get all ready, already up in Orange County. That way, I don't have to deal with traffic, you know. And I had this huge, just like a couple years ago, I had this huge meeting. It was a big deal. C-suite, other company coming involved is like this big thing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to get up 5. I'm going to work out. I'm going to, come in just pumped and ready. So I get to the gym, at like 6 a.m., figure I'll work out and get to the office by like 7:30. And I, I grab my bag and I go to get my like nice clothes because I always, pack everything the night before and like hang the clothes in my car. And I look in the back seat. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I left all my clothes hanging on the door of my house, like the back of my door. So I don't have clothes.
Man.
But I'm an hour and 15 minutes away from home. And I'm
Mhm.
like, worked out. I'm like, what do I do? So then I'm like panic mode because the meeting's starting like right at 9. So then I'm looking, frantically, like, where can I go? And this is the only thing I can see that might have something remotely decent is like Target. Cause I'm like, well, at least they have a men's section. There's decent stuff. And they open at 8. So it's like they open at 8. The meeting's at 9. It's 15 minutes, like basically. So I'm like doing the math in my head. And I get there. So I'm waiting outside, literally like waiting, 8:01. They finally open the door and I'm run to the back of the section. And then they have all this cool stuff. But the problem is that everything's got like a line or a crease, because it needs to be ironed or whatever. And I'm just like frantically like, so finally I find like something that's not wrinkled and so thing. I got to get belt, the whole 9 yards, everything. I don't have anything. So put it all together and then I like run there, get dressed literally in like the bathroom at the office and show up for this meeting. And I just was like so frazzled, and tried to walk in like I was good to go. But it was just, to your point, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing?
I love that story. I mean, that sounds like a day in my life, really.
So tell me, so 2 more questions. So one is, what was the biggest challenge? And then also the coolest part about writing a book?
Ooh, the biggest challenge about writing a book? Oh gosh, I think probably just starting it. Just just diving in. I think that's the hardest part because I mean, how many times do we say, "Oh, I have this great idea. Oh, I want to do this." And then you see people doing it and you're like, "I could have done that or I had that idea." And it's so frustrating when that happens. And so I think the hardest part is just deciding that you're going to do it and start. And there's definitely some strategies for that which we figured out.
Yeah.
And the coolest part for me was I got to work on it with one of my best friends, Charmine Adaran, Dr. Adaran, at the school. And so it's just been such a joy to work with her and
Mhm.
to get to do speaking engagements with her and help people together. I don't like doing things just by myself. I like to work as a team.
Yeah.
So that is probably the most fun is just being able to make an impact and I don't even have to spend time. We get letters from people all the time that say that they improved their brand or, they made some sales and it's somebody that we never even met. So I think that is really the coolest part.
That is, and I think I love that feedback too. Because that's actually was going to be my last question, which is, you know, what besides just doing it, like what is the best method or what would you suggest someone does who's sitting there and thinking that exact thought, right? Which is, I've got this great idea, I've got this great thing that so many people would benefit from. I should write a book, but like, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like, just how do you motivate to start it, or how, what is your suggestion after going through the process?
Yes, I actually just worked on this with somebody last week, and Charmine and I did this as well. So we rented a room, or we just reserved a room on campus. And at the university, we have rooms, and the entire room is a whiteboard, so you can write on every space.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
we took 3 hours, and we said, okay, everybody's asking us for help with their brand. We give people advice one on one, or
Mm-hmm.
like us with a small group. What is the general advice that we give everybody? What do we do? And so we just basically whiteboarded the whole thing. And there were over
Wow.
30 whiteboards in the room. And so, and you don't have to have a whiteboard. You can use post-it notes. Post-it notes
Really?
are fantastic. And you just map it out of what it's going to look like. What I love about rapid prototyping, using a design thinking method with post-it notes, is that you can put all the post-it notes up. You ask questions like, how might we, solve
Mhm.
this problem? So whatever you have expertise in, just say, how might we, help to do this specific thing in order to achieve this specific goal? And then you just start writing. Set a timer for 2 minutes. Write as many things as you possibly can up on your post-it notes and put them up. Then you can start to categorize them into themes, which could potentially be, your chapters or your
Mhm.
sections, and then you have chapters within. So when you can just take a couple hours, and commit to doing that and organizing your thoughts, you have the entire outline of your book. So now you're not just looking at one blank page. Now you just go ahead and write it in. So what we did was we took the 30 days, or the 30 boards, we made a day about each one, and then we just came up with a standard process. So we said, what is the title? What is the definition of this chapter? Why is it important? What's an example of what to do and what not to do? And then what's an activity to apply this?
Mhm.
And then we said, okay, let's just write that for each of the chapters. And before you knew it, we had a book, where it
That's
just seemed
awesome.
like it was such a monster before.
Yeah.
And then we just used the process. The process worked. It was beautiful. And it was nice when you
Yes.
have somebody, because when you're doing the post-it note exercise, or the rapid prototyping, you vibe off of each other.
Yeah,
So,
for
you
sure.
say something, I think of an idea because I'm inspired by what you said. And so the creativity really starts flowing, and then
Mhm.
you're not sitting there with that writer's block anymore, like, how can we do this? And it unlocks a different part of your brain. So
Yeah.
huge advocate for that. And I was thinking about even doing a workshop or something, even on Zoom, to
Yeah.
help people that wanted to write, just to join in one day for free. Anybody that's interested in that. So if you're ever interested, or
Well,
people
hey,
are,
when
we
it's
can create
time, let me know, and I will let
something.
everybody I know about it, because, I think you're right on. And at the end of the day, I so much of what I've done in the last 15 years, I feel is overlapping with what you're teaching, which is great, because those methods work so well. I used to I taught an adult learners workshop for years. So it was every time someone would get promoted into a district or, regional type manager role, we'd take this group every 6 months and we teach them these adult learner principles and like how to actually design a workshop, how to design a meeting. And that was always one of our first parts. Was we do a post-it exercise where they would put these categories around the room, and then you'd eventually break them down and down and down, and eventually you'd have your category, your themes, your main message, and what you're going to get out of it. And it was like a fun way, but within 1 hour you like, okay, I have my whole framework, and it's not so hard, it's not so daunting, when you do it that way. But I love that. So last thing, is, so tell everybody, so if they want to check out the book, if they want to connect with you, what is the best way?
Well, the best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn, but I would say, please, 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 if you connect with me on LinkedIn, then when you hit connect, make sure you actually write a comment. So you
Yeah.
write a note. So usually, if you're on your computer, you hit connect. It says, "Would you like to write a note?" Add a note. Yes, do
Yes.
that. Say that you heard it here, so that way I know, because when you just send a connection request, I don't know if I know you or not. So I want to make sure that I'm bringing the people into my network that I can help, and they can help me. We have some mutual connection there. So say something about how I should know you, why we should connect. And of course, if there's a listener here, I'm happy to connect. And then you can see where the book is. It's on Sentia Publishing. It's Sentia, Sentia, if you're interested
Yep.
in that. But yeah, I'd love to connect, and I definitely want to make an impact and help people who are interested in writing. There are some easy steps that you can take to to really turn that idea and that dream into
Hmm.
something that's actually happening.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I learned a ton. I feel like I could talk sales for hours with you for sure. So one day I'm gonna figure out how to log my whole sales team into one of your workshops. It's gonna happen. We're gonna make it happen somehow.
Absolutely, I'd love to. I'd love to.
Awesome. Well,
Well,
thank you so
thank you
much. I
so
appreciate
much.
your time.
Oh, thank you. It was fun. Thanks, Brett.